So we are continuing this morning our series on faith in stress, because once again, unfortunately, we have not been able to defeat stress. Stress is still a part of everyday life. I doubt even one of you had even one day without one piece of stress coming along to try and trip you up this week. This is a cumulative, it's a building series. That is, week one, we asked the question, what does the word faith mean? And then week two, we looked at faith leading to action. But we also touched on the fact that your faith is in Jesus. We're going to develop that a little bit more. We're going to look at Jesus a little bit more this week. By the end of the first century, there was this teaching that the apostles were very worried about getting in and taking root in the church. There was this teaching that Jesus was only God, but not human, not man. And he only appeared. He only looked like he was a man. He only looked like he died on a cross. He only looked, and this teaching was called Docetism. It comes from the Greek word meaning to appear. Now, you'll remember in 1 John, John writes some very strong language, very strong words. Anybody who teaches that Jesus did not come in the flesh does not have the Father and does not have the Son, and in fact is Antichrist. And you know that word because that's a very pop word. There is the Antichrist, but John says that many Antichrists, plural, had already come in his day, in the first century. And anti, yes, it means against, but it also means in place of. So Antichrist does not just mean against Christ, it means something trying to get in the place of Christ. Get your eyes off Jesus Christ that you meet in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, and the rest of the New Testament, and instead get your faith, get your view on this false Christ. This teaching probably came from people being a little bit acquainted with the Christians, but definitely influenced by Greek thought. Greek thought that the world, flesh, physical, bad, spiritual, ethereal, other, good, and therefore, Jesus good, Jesus couldn't possibly have real flesh. He had to have only appearance flesh. This brings me to my first point there in your sermon outline. The New Testament witnesses that Jesus came in the flesh. The New Testament says that he was conceived by the Holy Spirit. He was born of the Virgin Mary. He was tempted in every way, just as you and I are. We're going to look a little more at that. He died upon the cross. He was buried. He rose again. And so this view that Jesus only appeared to be human, but was only God, it has to be false because of the witness of the New Testament. Those of you familiar with church history, you know that just a couple hundred years later, the argument is going to be the exact opposite. Arius is going to be running around saying that Jesus was not God, he was only man. So you got the exact flip side of the coin in just a couple hundred years after that. In Sunday school, we've been laser focused on Jesus as God, and that's very important. This morning, we're going to focus more on Jesus as human, as man, without denying that Jesus was God. But this is so important, I want to park on it all morning and stay on it, because it touches something in you and me that's so important that we can't undermine it. We can't let it just be part of the peripheral. It has to be central. I want to ask, anybody here ever lived, you survived, you're alive today because of broke food? You ever survived just on $2 or $3 getting you to a payday, and you were eating less than high on the hog? Anybody? My mom got so mad at me. I ever told somebody this story. They ever told my mom this story. It got back to her, and then it got back to me that she knew. She was so mad at me. There was about, I'm trying to remember something more than 20 years ago. I think for at least 3 to 5 days, I lived on ketchup sandwiches.
Oh, yes.
I had like $2 or $3 to my name in cash. The store down the street, I think it had bread on sale, and I think it had ketchup on sale. And so I lived for about 3 to 5 days on ketchup sandwiches. My mom was so mad at me. She was like, "You should have called me. I would have given you $20. You could have gotten more food." $20 went a lot further back then. But the reason I bring this up to you, though, is because as I asked, maybe you didn't recognize the term broke food, but you knew exactly what I was talking about as I unpacked it. Because I believe the majority of everybody has at some point had to stretch a dime further than it was ever meant to go. And you lived on ketchup sandwiches, or you lived on something just to make it to a payday. You were just hoping that you could get to that next payday. The majority of everybody has been there. The majority of everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about. But God, by His very nature, by His very essence, by who He is outside of paydays. God is not sitting there waiting for the next payday. God has never waited for the next payday. And although He worked for a week, if you follow, He wasn't working towards the end of the week to get to payday. He doesn't have bills. He doesn't need food. And so it would be very easy, as you're going through that, to go, who is God to judge me when He's never had to wait for payday? Go ahead and open to Luke chapter 4. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all witness very quickly in their Gospels to Jesus' temptation in the wilderness. Mark, because he just decides to skip any birth and nativity story, he gets to it very quickly. Matthew and Luke have to include the nativities, and then Luke also has his episode of little Jesus in the temple. And so it takes to chapter 4 for Luke to get us there. So let's jump into Luke chapter 4 this morning, verses 1 and 2. This is after the baptism by John. The Spirit leads him into the wilderness. Verse 1. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led around by the Spirit in the wilderness for 40 days, being tempted by the devil. And he ate nothing during those days, and when they had ended, he became hungry. There's a few supernatural fasts in the Bible, Moses and Elijah and Jesus. Now, just a very quick look at me, and you'll go, that is a guy who hasn't missed many meals. And it's true. I've not missed, even if it was just a ketchup sandwich meal, I've not missed many meals. And this has nothing to do with the sermon. This has nothing to do with theology. This is me saying I'm so glad somebody along the way ever took the word angry and took the word hungry and put them together. And if you don't know, the word is hangry. And I'm so grateful for whoever invented that, because the thing is, when you are hungry, you are far more irritable. You are far more susceptible to anger. Or at least I am. Maybe you're holier than I am, and that's fair. But look at this story. Jesus is hungry. That very base human feeling that everyone has had, Jesus had that very base feeling. Let's continue verses 3 through 4. And the devil said to Jesus, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." And Jesus answered him, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone." There's this very, very rare condition that some people have ever had where even after they've eaten, they never feel full. Something is wrong and they can't feel full. Those people have to be on particular medication, and they have to be on particular schedules. But now, I want to tell you about this fellow I met once. It was on a long car ride, me and 2 other guys and this fellow. And this fellow could not get sarcasm. Sarcasm went completely over this fellow's head. And if you know me, I am nothing if not sarcastic. Somebody once criticized me. They said, sarcasm will get you nowhere. I said, it got me to the sarcasm championship in Peru in 2008. And they said, really? And I said, no. We're driving along. It was a long, long drive. And the very first time I'm sarcastic, he doesn't get it, and he asks me about it. And it was funny, because he didn't get the sarcasm. But then it happened again. And then it happened again. And to the best of my knowledge, the fellow was not autistic. Maybe he's on the scale, I don't know. But after a while, it got hard to be in the car. It got hard to visit. It got hard to talk, because he could not pick up any sarcasm. The others would say something and he would take everything concrete, literal, and it just became so hard to connect with him. I just didn't feel any kind of connection to him. Why do I tell you that story? Why do I tell you about people who can't feel full, and why do I tell you about this fellow who couldn't pick up sarcasm? Well, again, God is something outside of the created order. He's the one that created the created order, ergo, he's outside of it. And in Psalm 50, he says that the creation is his, and all of the animals are his. And he also says, if I were hungry, would I tell you? Remember that in the Israelite religion, there was animal sacrifice, but the animal sacrifice was never God needs to eat. And that was in pagan animal sacrifice, that you have to sacrifice so that the God eats, right? But that was never a part of Israel religion, that God eats. And there's something there that I want to grab, and I want to focus on. If we don't have anything even base in common, how can we ever connect? This brings me to my second point there in your bulletin. Jesus experienced our needs. Once again, hunger is one of the base needs. One of the very bottom, everybody has it, everybody knows it. Jesus experienced hunger. Let's continue staying here in Luke chapter 4, verses 5 and 6. Then Satan led Jesus up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And the devil said to him, I will give you this domain and all of its glory, for it has been handed over to me, and I give it to whomever I wish. There is another base concept that all of us get, and that's power. The want for power. Because if you have power, then you can get everything else you want. And the temptation here is Jesus. I know who you are. I don't know what your exact plan is. Satan come along and saying this. But whatever your plan is, why don't you do it my way? It'll be a lot easier. I have all of this power, and I will give it to you. So just do whatever your goal is, just do it my way, and it'll be a lot easier. It'll go a lot smoother for you. And here's the thing about shortcuts. Shortcuts are tempting, aren't they? Shortcuts sound good because you get what you want quicker. You reach your goal quicker. Now, I don't know why. Some people have ever come up with good theology questions, and then some people have ever come up with, well, I guess if you want to spend your time thinking about that, go ahead. People have ever asked, but was Jesus actually tempted? Like was it a real temptation? Or since he was God incarnate, was it kind of like a facade? Kind of like just a pretend? Flip over with me to Luke chapter 22. Luke chapter 22. verses 41 through 45. This is in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he, Jesus, withdrew from them about a stone's throw, and he knelt down and began to pray, saying, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but your will be done. Now an angel from heaven appeared to him, strengthening him. And being in agony, he was praying very fervently, and his sweat became like drops of blood falling down upon the ground. This is the exact same Jesus that in Luke chapter 9 twice indicates, I'm going to go and I'm going to die. And it's going to be for a cause. It's going to be for a purpose. He does it again in chapter 18. He predicts his death. And he knows, he understands what his death means for the lost. And in this very same chapter, just an hour or less earlier, he took the cup and he said, this is the new cup let me start that sentence all over again. He took the cup and he said, this is the blood of the new covenant, my blood of the new and everlasting covenant. He knew. But then we get to the garden. We get this episode in the garden. And it's recorded for us in Matthew. It's recorded in Mark. It's recorded in Luke. And Jesus is praying his heart out to the Father, saying, if you are willing, remove this cup. And in the Old Testament, the wrath of God is often portrayed as a cup. The nations will drink of the wrath of God, and so forth. And he is so stressed that his sweat is like blood. Everybody here has doubted. I don't have to define the word doubt for you this morning, do I? Just saying the word doubt, everybody. I have a 5-year-old right now. He's so cute. He'll use a word and then he'll ask, what does that word mean? I love it. I love it, especially when he asks weird words. That's like the only other synonym I know, you're also not going to know that synonym either. I don't have to define the word doubt for you because you know what the word doubt means. And if I ask you, have you ever doubted? Every hand will go immediately up. You have doubted. Doesn't matter if it's a small doubt or a big doubt. You've doubted. Do you see Jesus in this episode? He's doubting. People have ever thought we need to rescue Jesus from this scenery. We need to explain away the cup. We need to explain away the prayer because it makes Jesus look weak. It makes Jesus look like he's doubting. Well, he is. Because he's pouring his heart out to the Father. Did we overlook a plan B? Did we overlook a plan C? Is this really the only plan that we've got? Point number 3 in your bulletin. Before his arrest, Jesus was asking the Father, is there another way? He is literally on his knees begging the Father, is there another way? In just a few hours, he's going to be hanging on a cross. And he's going to quote from Psalm 22. I already read from Psalm 22 earlier. I read 2 times from Psalm 22. Psalm 22 is the famous psalm that begins with, my God, why have you forsaken me? David originally penned that psalm, and from the cross, Jesus quotes that psalm. David wrote that psalm in a place of deep grief. He wrote that psalm in a place of deep need. He wrote that psalm in a dark place. An honest but dark place. Where the same guy who would write, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, want, he also wrote, my God, why have you forsaken me? Because David is a complicated person. Because faith is a complicated subject. By the way, you have a homework assignment. I want you to read Psalm 22. I want you to see Jesus in Psalm 22, but I also want you to see David's the one who wrote it, though. Where was David, not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, in his faith walk? Where was he when he wrote that? Because from the cross, Jesus is quoting that. It's a psalm about hurt and being mocked. It's a psalm about feeling abandoned. It's so important for us to not overlook the humanity, the human side of Jesus. Because in the human side of Jesus, he absolutely experienced our humanity. Have you been mocked? Have you felt abandoned? Have you felt hurt? Don't overlook who our great high priest is. Flip with me to Hebrews again. We'll be in Hebrews chapter 2. The author of Hebrews is stressing to his original audience that the new covenant is superior and supersedes the old covenant. In chapter 2, he lays down that Jesus has brought salvation to undeserving humanity. But now look at this. After Jesus has brought salvation to undeserving humanity, chapter 2, verses 10 through 18. For it was fitting for him, from whom all things are all things, and through whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, I'm going to start this all over again. To perfect the author of their salvation through suffering. For both he who sanctifies and those who are sanctified are all of one Father. For this reason, he is not ashamed to call them brethren, saying, I will proclaim your name to my brethren. In the midst of the congregation, I will sing your praise. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again, behold, I and the children whom God has given me. Therefore, since the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise also partook in the same, so that through death he might render powerless him who had the power over death, that is, the devil, and might free those who through fear of death were subject to slavery all their life. For assuredly, he does not help angels, but he gives help to the descendants of Abraham. Therefore, he had to be made like his brethren in all things, so that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. For since he himself was tempted in that which he has suffered, he is able to come to the aid of those who are being tempted. I've never liked when people have said that Christians believe in a sky daddy. Have you ever heard that term before? A sky daddy? It's a pejorative. It's trying to mock. But I also believe that it's a straw man. And I think that when you hear things that are straw men, you need to call them out as straw men. A straw man, you know what a scarecrow is, right? Scarecrow sitting out in a field. And a scarecrow can't put up much of a defense. If you want to go knock over that scarecrow, well, you can do it. Well, a straw man argument is just that. It's kind of a mockery. A scarecrow looks kind of like a man, but it's not a man. And it's very easy to knock over. So the view that Christians believe in a sky daddy, it's a straw man. It's easy to knock it over, but here, I want to give you another analogy. Can I get the picture up here? So this is a picture from 2 television shows, and if you're not familiar with these television shows, I'm not baptizing these television shows. Instead, I'm using this as an analogy, okay? So, although these are 2 different actors, they're the same character. And this is the older version, and this is the younger version of the same character. Now, in the younger version, you'll notice that he's wearing a nice proper shirt with a bow tie. And this is a huge point throughout the show. But now this is the older version of him, and he's wearing a child's adult t-shirt. So when he's young, he dresses like an adult, and when he's an adult, he dresses like he's young. And there's an inconsistency in this because of his character. Because of the nature of his character being unable to change, unable to adapt, unable to do things. And they write this whole sitcom all about this. But the fact that there's this inconsistency in these two portrayals of him, I want to grab that. I want to grab inconsistency. And I want to grab it for the simple purpose that simply painting God as a sky daddy who's way off somewhere out there, you absolutely fail to see Jesus. You absolutely fail to understand what it was for God to become incarnate, to come be one of us. Sky Daddy does not at all reflect the image of God, pun intended. Point number 4 in your bulletin. The God of Scripture that you're asked to trust in is a God that knows the stresses of humanity. He is not a remote and distant God who has no idea what we go through. Instead, He is a God who came and chose to be made like us in order to understand us, in order to go through the same things as us, in order to save us. I want to invite the worship team. I want to invite Tom to come on back up here. And I want to acknowledge Tom. Good job. You had a song where there's an echo and you're just one voice. So good job on doing a song where there's an echo. But with Tom coming back up here, I want to close. I want to close with this. This isn't mine. This was written by an East German pastor in about 1960. It's a play, and he wrote out the whole play, and this is the conclusion of the play. And I just want to read what he wrote. All of the people of the earth were assembled on the plains of Jehoshaphat, awaiting God's verdict. They were not, however, waiting submissively. On the contrary, they were gathering in small groups and talking indignantly. One was a band of Jews, a sect that knew little but religious persecution and societal persecution throughout their history. Included in their number were victims of Nazi extermination camps. Gathered together, the group demanded to know the right God had to pass judgment on them, especially a God who dwells securely in heaven. Another group consisting of American blacks, they too questioned the authority of God, who had never experienced the misfortune of men, never known the squalor and depths of human degradation which they had been subjected to in suffocating holds of slave ships. The third group was comprised of people born illegitimately, the butt of jokes and sneers all their life. Hundreds of such groups scattered across the plains, the poor, the afflicted, the maltreated. Each group appointed a representative to stand before the throne of God and to challenge His divine right to pass sentence on their moral decision. They met in council to decide what this remote and distant God, who had never experienced human agony, how He was qualified to sit in judgment unless He was willing to enter into their suffering, their humiliation, the state of man which they had endured and undergone. Their conclusion read, "You must be born a Jew. The circumstances of your birth must be questioned. You must be misunderstood by everybody, insulted and mocked by your enemies, betrayed by your friends. You must be persecuted, beaten, and finally murdered in a most public and humiliating fashion." Such was the judgment that they passed on God before the assembly. The clamor arose to a fever pitch as they awaited his response. Then a brilliant, dazzling light illumined the entire plain. One by one, those who had passed judgment on God fell silent. For emblazoned on high in the heavens for the whole world to see was the signature of Jesus Christ with this inscription, I have served my sentence.